We're all very human and fallible, and yet we live in a society that rewards pretending we're not fallible, or the range of acceptable fallibility is narrow.
We are constantly comparing our insides to other people's outsides and feeling inadequate and guilty, even ashamed.
Trying to blend in means parts of ourselves must disappear, and we must then live in fear that we will be found out.
Here, together, we will create a space where we can laugh, cry, and carry our suffering and hurts lightly.
In the service of being deeply human.
This is Life's Dirty Little Secrets.
Welcome to Life's Dirty Little Secrets. I'm Emma Waddington.
And I'm Chris McCurry. And today we are honored, privileged to welcome Lakeysha Hallmon. She received her BA from Tougaloo, am I pronouncing that correctly? College. Her master's in education and curriculum instruction from the University of Mississippi, and her doctorate in education from Liberty University. She's a former English teacher who moved to Atlanta in 2011 and in 2016 founded the Village Market, a platform that connects Black-owned businesses to consumers through access to business resources, educational programs, and marketplaces. In 2017, Dr. Hallmon launched Our Village United, a nonprofit organization that supports small business development through its primary program, Elevate. And in 2024, she published No One is Self-Made, Build Your Village to Flourish in Business and Life, a book that challenges the myth of individualism and emphasizes collaboration and community as critical tools for business and personal development. And she has a vast number of awards, honors, and recognitions, being named one of Forbes 50 champions. The list goes on. Georgia Trend's 500 Most Influential Leaders, Trailblazer Award from the Atlanta Business League. Our great privilege to welcome Dr. Hallmon. Thank you for being with us today.
I am excited to be here and excited to be in conversation with y'all. So thank you so much for having me in your space.
Oh, by all means. So today we're going to be exploring the dirty little secret of no one is actually self-made. And, you know, we humans are like deeply wired for connection. It's just part of who we are, which only makes sense, you know, because that's how we survived for all those years when life was pretty scary. And unfortunately, for a lot of people in the world, life is still very scary. And connection is really important so that people can thrive. And yet, you know, we live in this culture here in the West where, you know, John Wayne, you know, the Lone Ranger, you know, rugged individualism, you know, the self-made person, you know, used to be the self-made man, the entrepreneur, you know, these concepts seem baked into our culture. And yet, you know, they can have some harmful effects as well. But the myth has a lot of staying power. I'm wondering if you could speak to why the self-made person, the rugged individual, has such staying power and why this is in some ways harmful, if not even toxic.
Absolutely. So I think we can back up just a little bit on how I landed to this space before my book was launched February 2025. I can't tell you both how many times I was on panels and in conversation or being featured somewhere, and with good intentions, people will ask me, how does it feel to be a self-made woman? And in the entrepreneur world, I heard this all the time. But when I would sit in those conversations, it just did not feel true. And I never want to sit in space or amplify stories that are untrue to what my existence has been. And so I was always clear that what people were trying to tell me is that job well done. You have built something, you have grown something, and I know it did not come without a great level of self-determination. And I have a great deal of it. But when I sat in those conversations, and when they would say that, the discomfort would come over me because I knew the impact that my family had on me, my friends, my team, the community, for my businesses and enterprises. And so I would sit and I would wrestle with that. And I remember in one reflection in my journal, I was like, but I'm not self-made. I'm actually village-made. I'm a product of so many people who intentionally poured into me, from resources to knowledge sharing to access for relationships to staying up late, because all entrepreneurs know that somehow 3 o'clock in the morning is a magical hour that wakes us up and it's so annoying. And I remember the people who answered my phone calls when I couldn't sleep. And so that started me on this journey of really unpacking this deeply Western belief of this rugged individualism, this notion to be a successful entrepreneur. The more glorifying story is to tell the dogmatic story of what it means to do it alone. It is very American. And in America, we love some really rags to riches stories of somehow you embarked upon this impossible journey, and now you're sitting on Mount Rushmore or whatever the Mount Rushmore is. It is deeply American, deeply Western, deeply individualistic. And while those stories have been glorified, and do they sound good? Yes, they sound great. But the reason why they're harmful is because it doesn't matter who we're celebrating, from Jay-Z to Elon Musk, whoever it is, whoever that person who's exceeded a great deal of financial growth and access and capital. It is not true that they did it on their own. It is not true that I did it on my own. Regardless of what the support looks like, we all had it in some way. Some people were born into wealth. Some people were born into poverty. However you entered into this space, there are some people that pushed you further along and pushed you further than where you were. And so, because I speak to entrepreneurs all the time, and I'm very privileged to do that, I knew that it was important for me to start centering the true story of what I feel the true entrepreneur path, and the path that we should honor and center. And that is the path of really thanking and celebrating our village and the people who assisted us along the way. Because if we continue in this path of individualism, we're going to continue to experience the great divide between the have and the have-nots. That means there's only so much space for only a few people. And it's really sad, especially in my community, we can only name only a few people who made it to this particular place. We continue to amplify those stories and say that is the way we would take entrepreneurs and visionaries and builders. I think we take them away from the true epicenter. And epicenter is a multi-pronged and intentional, multi-invested community.
So you took this energy that you discovered and you started putting it into action. What's the first thing you did with it?
Beyond writing the book, to be able to scream with love with people, a lot of love in my screaming, saying, hey, y'all, no one's self-made. With individualism only works for a few. It doesn't work for the whole. And we need to build and believe and start to talk about things differently. The only way that I was able to write this book is because I've intentionally built companies that celebrate community. I've intentionally built ecosystems for entrepreneurs that's surrounded by a village. I don't believe that we can really write about things that we have not built. Theory is fine. Well, you all know that theory only takes us so far. We need practice. We need it to be tangible. And so my first company, the Village Market, I launched in 2016. It was very clear on what I was building. There was a great economic divide between Black and white businesses and other businesses. And I wanted to be a part of the change that closed that gap of resources, that closed that gap of upward mobility. And so I built the Village Market, and I told the community that if you love small businesses, if you love Black businesses, if you love local businesses, then that love should be a verb. It should be actionable. We should be very intentional in how we spend. We should be very intentional on leaving reviews. We should be very intentional on how we mentor. We should be intentional on how we strategically partner. As I built this model now for almost 10 years, the conversations for entrepreneurs began to shift. Less about I and more about we. How can we do this together? How can we build businesses that also have a good to the community? How do we create these businesses where we pay people a livable wage and there's dignity in the workspace? all that I have been doing is shifting mindset. And so while I have a privilege of launching ventures that have done well, I tell people I am in the business of shifting mindset in the way that we show up in the world, the way that we collaborate, the way that we see each other, the way that we strategically partner, the way that we hold conversations such as this, because I know that this is where the magic happens. I know that this is where the change happens. And if we want to move our communities forward, if we want to be the living example of what it means to be collaborative and supportive and communal, we're the generation that has to do it. And so from Village Market to my nonprofit, Our Village United, to even writing this book and talking about these things, my life is built deeply in intentional practice.
Did you get any resistance to this in the community?
Oh my gosh, so much. So much resistance.
How did that manifest itself?
Yeah, it manifested itself in some very direct conversations that people would have with me. Like, Key, this is what you're trying to build. No, it's not possible. This communal sense of entrepreneurship, this collective, that is not the way that entrepreneurship is done.
Yeah, it's almost an oxymoron.
Yeah, absolutely. That entrepreneurship is rising to the top and being the best. And I would challenge that, and I would say entrepreneurship is how many businesses can we get to rise to the top at the same time? Because if we can do that at the same time incrementally, then we can improve our communities exponentially. And so less about one and more about the strength of the mighty. But I can't tell you both how many people even shared things like you should keep your full-time job. And let me be very clear. I am a believer that we should all keep our full-time jobs. And then when we're ready to make that big transition to entrepreneurship, then we do that. These are things that I wrote about in my book as well. But it was a great deal of resistance. But what I knew and what I had inside of me, while I was met with a lot of no's and a lot of people who did not see the vision that I had, I can't share with you both. I was unwavering in what I saw in my mind. I was so clear that the vision that kept awakening me, I was so clear that our North Star is an intentional community. I've been so clear that if we look at any moment of history, from the hardest, the most bleak times, the way that we survived and persisted in those times is because we joined united in community and said, not on our watch. And so that is that deep belief that lives in my belly, that like rests in my heart space. And so while I got a lot of no's, the yes that I relied on was the yes that was so innate inside of me that every time I got a no, I would hear it, I would process it. And I was like, I'm going to build anyway. And I think this is so true for so many other entrepreneurs and builders and people who are not entrepreneurs. And what I'm talking about is a deep conviction of purpose. And so I won't say that my human self, that my feelings were not hurt. They were hurt. I can't say my human self that did at moments that I say, now, wait, is there something to what they're saying? Do you need to stay focused and stay in education? I did all those things. But what I did not do is allow that to be my loudest voice. I literally built anyway. And then there's this movie that I watched as a kid. It's one of my dad's favorite movies. And now, of course, it's one of my favorite movies, but Field of Dreams. And one of the central themes in Field of Dreams, and you all may know this, but if you build it, they will come. And so what I realized that I had to spend less time trying to win people over, and I needed to spend more time building and showing people what I am doing. And if I build it well enough, my people would come. And y'all, they did. They absolutely came. And that is always my advice to entrepreneurs who go on an uncharted path or the road less traveled. I always share that if you build it and build it well, your partners, your team, your resources would come because it would become so attractive that people want to be a part of it. So it was less about me convincing and more about me building well to make it luminous, because people want to be a part of something that feels powerful. And I rested in that. And so while I had some many quiet months of building quietly, I was so clear that when I did my big reveal to the community, that it was going to be magnetic and that my work wouldn't be done, but I wouldn't have to plead and keep taking the meetings and selling people on a vision. I needed to plant people in the experience.
You have the proof.
Yeah, you have to have the proof.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I can't remember the name of the Spanish poet who said, "Traveler, there are no paths. Paths are made by walking."
Yes, absolutely. Or the
Wow.
road less traveled.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just, as you were speaking, thinking about, I love what you said about, screaming with love. What a lovely way to put it. It's brilliant. It's really lovely. And that you were screaming with love that really what we need is this community. And I'm, from an entrepreneur perspective, that's really beautiful to think that actually, I sometimes, as you were talking, I was thinking the tide is rising, all the ships rise with it, right? But I would love to hear your thoughts. Why is it, that as you're trying to climb or trying to create these ideas of that community is what we need, there is such a resistance? It just seems sometimes it sort of surprises me that we find it so hard, or there's almost like it feels like a bit of a fear in investing in a community, in supporting our community. I'm thinking beyond even sort of from a work business environment, but our neighborhood, the humans that are struggling around us. Like it's difficult. People don't do it, even though it sounds so beautiful. And when we feel we're a part of a community and we, somebody offers us, support, it feels so good. And yet it is so hard. I'll put my hand out, to do and not to be thinking for yourself. And what is that?
To speak plainly, it's the human experience. The reality is we come to community as individuals with lived experiences where we may not have been trained and taught healthy relationships, healthy communication styles, healthy disagreement. We come to community with some of us, with a great deal of hurt. And so because of that, there is a level of distrust that we bring into the room with us, even with the best intentions. We come into a community with a great deal of disappointments. People who said that they would do a thing and didn't do a thing. And so when we bring our human selves to community, the community gets the most human selves. And it shows up beyond, especially from the moment of when it feels good. Because when it feels good and we're all getting together, everybody, the dopamines are going, and we all feel great. Then when the dopamines come down and we're just human to human, and we're having to intentionally collaborate and push each other and share resources and share space and all those things that we've experienced in life, sometimes they run to surface and they tell us to retreat. You can't trust this space. This is not safe. Remember the disappointments. Remember how people have let you down. Remember how people didn't do their part. Remember. And so we get into this protective mode of trying to save and protect ourselves. And it interrupts progress. So this is what I believe. The work is for us to do our own individual work of healing. Imagine if we all did our own individual work of healing, confronting those things that I just named. And we enter community from a place of being healed rather than a place of being scorned. I think that we would get something different. But it's going to require a level of discipline and a level of almost an awakening to know that we have to do our individual work. But community is hard because relationships are hard. And what I encourage people as we build these intentional communities is that just because it's hard doesn't mean that's not where you're supposed to be. It depends on what type of hard it is. But if it's hard because you're uncomfortable, if you want to build anything worthwhile, it's going to take a level of discomfort. It is going to stretch you. It is going to push you to be its best self. And this is exactly what community is as well. I write a great deal about scarcity in the book as well, because Emma, you raise a really good point around, like, I need to put my own oxygen mask on first. That's what they tell us on the plane, right? I believe that as well. I believe that. But I can tell you both, being able to collaborate with like-minded, mission-aligned, and values-aligned people, I have gone so much further than trying to trug at it alone. My good friend was on a panel, and so one of the things that she said that really resonated with me, she said, do I want 100% of the small amount that I've been able to do on my own? Or do I want this 30% of what we can build together that exceeds the 100% that I built on my own? When we see the potential of collaboration, when we see the potential of an intentional community and how it goes back to benefit you and those who matter most to you, I believe then we can start to move forward. But community is not a space where everything is always supposed to feel good. Community is not a space where we just come together in kumbaya. Community is a space where we're intentional, where we're setting goals, or we're looking at KPIs, especially if we're trying to build things. And we have to decide, what are our values and how do we align there? And what is the mission that we're working towards? I go back to the word discipline, because to be in an intentional community requires discipline to stay in it, and discipline to not exit the room too fast because it becomes uncomfortable. But I want to be clear, y'all, it is what we're talking about. It has great benefits when we do it well. But I know that so many people abort the mission far too soon because it has not been modeled. But I always go back to history. The reason why I go back to history is because we need evidence of what we're talking about. So historically, there have been so many micro communities that have done some incredible things, from the Montgomery bus boycott to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to so many other beautiful movements. It took intentional people who I knew probably were not always friends, who probably got on each other's last nerve, who probably had some choice words that didn't make it to the history book. But they decided that the mission was far greater than that moment of discomfort, that the collective interest was much more important than these personal disagreements, because our human selves come to moments. And so we have to do our individual work when that come to be. But then we have to choose and consistently choose each other when it gets hard. And hard doesn't mean toxic. I'm always careful here, because I don't think we need to be in every community. I want to be clear. I do not think we need to be in every community. And we need to be in community that is values aligned and mission aligned. But if we're not aligned in values, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for us to coexist in a meaningful way.
We often talk on this podcast about the idea of get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes.
For so many endeavors, whether it's learning to play the violin, starting a business, or a relationship,
Yeah. Or me getting back to the gym and my sore muscles, I have to see it through. And I think that's with everything in life. We have to see through the hard moments. There's just fundamentally believe from our own life experiences, if we do not give up too soon, there's something far greater waiting on us.
And that's the level of trust, right? So as you were saying about, building something great and people will follow, there is that, obviously, like you said, you look through history, you can see all these examples, but that level of trust in the moment that, this is really important and it's worth it. It's worth sitting through some of the difficult feelings. It's worth, being challenged. And I think when I think about community, I even think about within the family, right? It's in the family, our families are, being human is being messy, like you said. And it means that, feelings get hurt, misinterpreted, and being able to step into those moments with a curiosity versus a judgment is incredibly hard. I call it the Jedi skills. One of our old podcast guests taught me this. It's a real Jedi skill. It goes against our, default of just wanting to push people away, of wanting to do it alone because it's painful. You rub up against difficult things when you create communities, when you are with humans, and trusting that it's worth it. It's worth bumping up to hard things to stay the course. And I think that piece around values probably is the glue. That's why trust lives, is in those values. So maybe we could talk a little bit about, purpose and values, because you talk about it so beautifully in your book. How do we figure that out? How do we figure out that this is really important to us?
Yeah, I think these purpose conversations, they come up a lot. And for so many people, it's an intimidating conversation because while I wake up in the morning and I feel a profound purpose on my life, there are some people that wake up in the morning and they don't wake up with that blanket of love. They feel as though they're going to do the same thing that they've been doing every day, going to the same job, having the same roles in their families. And there's a level of discontent, and they don't know how to tap into that purpose. And so what I share, and I write about this in the book, before we get there, what I do believe is that we have these divine assignments. I think that there are moments in your life when we think back and that it had to be divine, that you met this person, that you volunteered here, that you showed up at this event, that you were sitting next to this person on a plane or on the bus, that you find yourself talking to a stranger in a grocery store, and then you find out that it's the person that you were meant to meet. I think these moments are divine. I look at them as a constellation in the sky that is guiding us to our purpose. I think these little moments that nudge us, that make sure that we're walking on course. And I also write about in moments in my own life, especially when I was in the education space. I'm forever an educator. It just looks different now. But I wanted to move to Atlanta. I was like, I got to get to Atlanta. I'm from Mississippi. I love Mississippi, by the way. But I wanted to get to Atlanta. It was close enough that I can go home and see my family all the time, and far enough that I don't see my family all the time. So it was like the perfect balance. And I didn't have relationships. I didn't have a lot of relationships here. So my last job in Mississippi was at Callaway High School. And this is divine assignment on steroids that I believe led me to even being able to be in this conversation with y'all. So I was teaching high school English next door to me. And I tell the story in the book, so I'm going to speed it up here because I want folks to read the book. But I was teaching English, regulars, honors, AP English. And next door was a special education class. And Miss Etheridge was the teacher there. And so she would ask me to come over. She would say, Hallmon, I need you to come over and volunteer today. I need you to help my students out. I want you to go over them with their reading and writing. And Miss E, she asked with love, but it was this is what I need you to do. And so I would volunteer, and I would volunteer on my off period. And Miss E and I developed a relationship where we would play tennis after school. And so she beat me every time. I still feel a way about that. But one of our tennis matches, where she beat me very badly, she's like, Hallmon, you need to get your special ed certification exam. You have a gift. And I was like, Miss E, I am an honors English teacher. I was young. I think I was maybe like 25, 26. And I was very clear on who I was and what I do. And I was like, Miss E, no, this is not what I'm supposed to do. She was like, Hallmon, I need you to get this certification exam. Likely because I raised by parents who told me to honor those who are older than me. I begrudgingly signed up for this certification exam. Begrudgingly. Young, almost overslept, didn't study. And I walked in with the mindset, I'm doing this only because Ms. E asked me to do it. Let me get this out of the way. took the exam, didn't think anything about it, and then started to do all the things to relocate to another city. So I had to put myself in the job market. Couldn't find a job anywhere. Every time that I would get close, the market, the Fulton County, the Cobb County, Atlanta market, they were just picking people who were not relocating out of state. So I kept getting passed on. And finally landed an interview at South Cobb High School with Dr. Ashley Hosey. And when I got in the car, my mother was living at the time, but I called her. I was like, I know I got this job. I know this is it. And so Dr. Hosey called and told me how well I did. Essentially, this is your job. I believe next day, Dr. Hosey called and he had to rescind the job offer because a teacher with more seniority wanted to come to that particular school. I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed because I just knew that I landed it. And so he was like, but I'm so impressed with you. I'm so impressed. He's like, now, if you have maybe a special ed certification exam, we can offer you a job. So what happened the week before, y'all? I got my certification exam. I passed. And so I was able to tell Dr. Hosey, like, well, as of last week, I do have my certification. And so I tell this story because all of that was divine. I was divinely situated to be next to Miss E next door. She was divinely in my life and came in a form that I could respect and honored to give me direction. And I think when you're seeking purpose and living a life where you are desiring more, I think people come into your life and they know how to lovingly nudge you to your greatest and most optimal selves. So Miss E pushed me. I listened because the body of who she is a person I deeply respect. Took the exam, got the job, came to Atlanta, stayed in education for a little while, but my purpose was to be an entrepreneur. My purpose was to be a writer. My purpose was to be a speaker. But if I didn't follow that divine assignment of first volunteering, being in service to something, if I didn't do that, if Miss E didn't nudge and push me, after I gotten so many no's, my only yes came because she advised me to take the certification exam. And so for people who are on the journey of trying to find a purpose, I asked them to step back and I said, well, are you on assignment right now? Maybe the job that you're in, maybe it's an assignment. Maybe this organization that you're volunteering for, maybe it's a divine assignment. So it's less about wanting to be somewhere else and being present in where we are and giving it all that we have so we can be pushed to the next thing. And I believe because of that, the purpose is already inside of us. We don't have to find it. It becomes awakened. I think every time we have these divine assignments and we pass the assignment, purpose awakens even more. That's been true for my life. And I write about even more moments in the book that I just cannot make up. It was something so profoundly, it was almost spiritual. Some of these experiences I've had with following my assignment, which has been a guiding light for me to being able to really allow my purpose to awaken inside of me and me not be afraid of it.
Yeah, sometimes we might talk about grace or other ways of describing this sort of the universe is just got plans.
Yes.
And
Yes.
but we have to be open to that. We have to be paying attention
Wow.
and not so caught up in the way things should be, and to allow things to be as they are and then watch them, take on some movement that maybe we didn't expect. So no, that's a wonderful story. I'm wondering if we could spend a little time talking about, I know you have these 6 roles, this framework in your book. Maybe we could just touch on a couple of them. We started to talk about values, and you talk about village-made values, and not as opposed to personal values, but maybe in collaboration with personal values. And then I also, given that networking is such a popular thing right now, you talk about village versus network. And there's a distinction between those two. So I'm just throwing that out there. You all can do what you want with it if I'm using you all correctly.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that I had a chapter that talks about how do you really build your village? Because I work with so many entrepreneurs across the country who say, I just need to find my people. I don't know how. And so in my roll call chapter, I outline these, what I believe are archetypes in every community. We have our futurists. These are the visionaries. I write about Dr. Martin Luther King in a book as a visionary. I write about former President Barack Obama as a visionary. These people who come and arrive to this planet with some big magnetic ideas, and they change the course of our lived experiences for better or for worse, but they change the course. And so I write about these futurists. And for so many entrepreneurs, they're visionaries or futurists. They can see things. It wakes them up at 3:00 in the morning. But what I know pairs well with a futurist is a builder. Somebody who can go beyond this big vision in your brain, who can put some processes, organizational structure in place. And I identify these people as builders. They roll their sleeves up and they get to work. And they often get to work for someone else's vision. But it's the perfect pairing from big vision to practicality. And then I write about a person who I've been in the community, and I occupy more of the futurist in the builder space. But I write about the connector because this connector is so central to relationships. I don't know if you all have ever just met someone that when you met them and they understood what you did and they even understand you all podcast, they'll say, you need to meet this person. This person is someone that you have to know.
That's how we met you.
That's how, thank you, Jill. That's Jill, shout out. But these connectors are how we grow our communities. It's how we deepen our relationships. It's how we expand the greatness of our work and what we're doing. And so connectors are critical, and they do it without thinking about it. They meet people who just fit together and say, y'all have to know each other. And then I write about these collaborators. These are people who say, oh, I see what you do and I see what I do. I have an idea how we can really work together and do something meaningfully. Collaborators are deeply intentional about doing it as a collective. And I write about enthusiasts. In my life, my enthusiast is my sister. I write about her in a book, my sister Yolanda. The enthusiast, or we can also call them a cheerleader. This is the person you call on your best day because they're going to probably scream louder than you. And these are the people that you call on your worst day because their voice is so sobering to your spirit that you know that it will pass. And so enthusiasts are so critical to community because these are the people that keep the light shining. These are the people in those very hard moments bring life back into us and remind us of who we are and what we're doing. And they're just the 10 out of 10 out of 10 cheerleaders. And then the observers. Let me be very clear. Most observers drive people bananas. These observers are the people who sit quietly in meetings, sit quietly at community events, sit quietly if there's a conference, they're sitting in the back of the room. And what's so powerful about them, they quietly observe everything. And why they are annoying is because how they're a little bit different than the enthusiasts. These observers observe the things that they feel we need to know. And these things may not be the stuff that we want to hear. So these observers to say, I don't really know. I know that you're excited about this meeting. I know that you think that this is the best partnership. I don't think this is the best partnership for you. Or I've been observing, I've been paying attention, and that you have completely changed in ways that do not reflect your values, that do not reflect your mission, that do not reflect the person who I met years ago. This vision or this vision is distorting your character. You don't always want to hear that. But observers have such a beautiful way of calling attention to the most critical things that we need to lean into and pay attention to. The reason why I write about these particular character traits and these archetypes and community is because we all need to know where we fit. And what's beautiful about the evolution is that we're not always one thing. There are moments where you're a futurist. There's moments when you're the connector. There's moments when you become the person who is the observer and have to deliver the news that may take the air out of the room just a little bit. If we know where we exist in community, if we know where our gifts lie, then we know that we have place in community. And also, as I write in this book, I also write about the weaknesses of all these archetypes, because none of them can exist alone. Chris, you said earlier, we need each other. Community is this we are innately communal people. And so from the futurist to the builder to the connector to the collaborator to the enthusiast to the observer, we need everybody in order to build an intentional and impactful community. And at the end of every chapter in my book, I have these reflection questions. As a former teacher in me, those reflection questions is because so many times we read great books and we can't really do anything with it. I really want this book, when we're looking at chapter by chapter, that you can actually do something with it so you can see where you are, and also so you can see who you need to attract, or the type of people that you need to build with.
I just wanted to touch before we end on, I love that chapter around, how to build your community, this idea that you have different humans because together you're more than you on your own. Like the idea that I can do everything on my own feels really lonely, but also lacks creativity, inspiration, excitement. I don't believe I have all the answers at all. In fact, if anything, I carry lots of imposterism. So I love this. I love the concept of building a community in so many ways. And one of the things that we started talking about before we jumped on the podcast, and I wanted us to just touch on it before, is this urgency and need to build a community. And when I think about community, I think about it, throughout our worlds, not just in, we think about it in the corporate world, we think about it in schools, but we think about it in our neighborhoods. And you're absolutely right. It's idyllic, but it's hard. And so the invitation today for our listeners is to sort of, as you talk about it, it feels all warm and fuzzy. And I think, I'm going to go out there and find my communities because, I want the futurist. I have a bit of futurist, I think, in me, but I don't have a lot of the builder. I have great ideas. And they sometimes sort of spill out of me, and I need somebody to come along.
And I get involved.
Exactly. That's right. Chris is much more of a builder than
Chris,
me.
I have an idea.
Yes, so true. So true. You are the builder.
We're great collaborators.
We are. We come together incredibly well. So perhaps for our listeners is to think about, this community that they can start building. What are some of the things they can start today to do?
Yes, I'm going to answer that. That was something I wanted to ping in my brain about what happens when we build alone. We also limit our potential. My best ideas is because I've been able to ping pong them off other brilliant people who say, hey, consider this. And what about this? And while it's still guided, the seed is my baby. But that seed is nurtured by other very brilliant people who have different lived experiences, different access than I do. And so what happens when we build alone or on our island, it limits the potential of our lives. The invitation that I give to the listeners is, do we want to live exponentially at our best for ourselves, for our children, for our family, for all those who we love, for our communities, and for our human existence? Do we want to live and maximize all our potential while we are here? And if the answer is yes, then the answer requires two things: us doing our own work of healing and us being tethered by intentional people who sharpens us, because iron sharpens iron. And for people who are desperate for community, because I was reading that we're experiencing a loneliness epidemic, and it happened on the height of social media, and then it was illuminated even more during the pandemic. And so many people did not recover from staying home, rather than having in-person meetings, doing everything via Zoom. And I'm one of those that like Zoom meetings, by the way. But we have somewhat retreated from each other. There's been a sense of comfort in us self-isolating. And if you know that you desire community, desire to be paired with like-minded people, most important thing that we can do today is get out of the house and go to spaces where we have interest in. So if it is entrepreneurial events, then you need to go to entrepreneurial events. If it's volunteering, you need to go do that. If you're in a corporate setting and you want to grow your career, been out of the corporate world for a while now, but you need to go to events where you can meet like minds. You need to go to conferences. You actually need to talk to people. In order for us to build community, we have to talk to each other. And not just talk to each other. We have to choose to see each other. Because seeing at this point of where we are is a choice. I can sit in this conversation with you and I can choose to let it just be a conversation, or I can choose to see Chris and Emma. And I can be deeply grateful for this moment and not allow it to be just another podcast, not just another passing moment, but be so deeply present and know that our gatherings are divine and intentional. And let me make sure that I show up fully in this moment. And what I'm speaking of is being deeply present. You build community by being present. That means rather than sitting at a table with family and friends or at an event and everyone is doing this, if y'all can see my phone, you put your phone down and we take time to actually delight in the experience of each other. These things that I'm naming, these are not epiphanies. These things are tested, tried, and true. We have to get out of our bubbles. We have to go in community of like-minded people. We have to have conversations. We have to choose to see each other. Have to choose to be deeply present. And why I was very careful to talk about building village and different with networking. Networking is so transactional. I don't know if you all ever been in spaces where you feel that someone just swiped the card on you. They just came to take. They came to take. They came to take. They came to distract. And it was never any giving. Networking is almost like swiping a card. And so I ask people less about being transactional and more about being intentional. Being intentional, why are you showing up, what you need, and what you have to offer. And what's clear, there are some seasons in our lives where we have more to offer. And there are some seasons in our lives where we have more to give. And there are seasons in our lives where we have to receive a lot more because we're in a deficit or we're in the building stage. What's powerful about community is when you get out of survival, when you have something to give, you have to remember your survival and remember people supporting you and make sure that you're a giver. So Emma, I gave you a long, rounded answer there, but we got to get out of our bubbles. We have to get out of our bubbles. We have to choose to be different. I think we've all heard being the change that we want to see. And sometimes we hear these things so much that they lose their sting. They lose the purpose of why we ever said it. I think now we got to hold words hostage and make them mean something in how we live our lives.
Amazing. So inspiring. And as we step outside and, be the change we want to see, it can sting.
Yeah. Oof. Yes. Worse. Oh, yes.
That's like a muscle. Jill, actually, fabulous Jill Stoddard, who introduced us,
Yeah.
she talks about building that muscle. And we've had a couple of other conversations on the podcast. We had one on conflict resilience and moral outrage. And, there's lots of conversations about how hard it is to be in communities where, people say things that you don't like, or people will point things out that you don't agree with. And our default is to move away, to sort of make them others and not one of us. And sometimes we don't have an us. It's just not us. But that creates division, and that polarization that we're seeing is getting worse. And instead, your invitation is to trust that there is your community. Your community is there. You will find it. You've got to move forward, and you've got to look for the people who share your values, your vision, what moves you, what fills your heart. And it's worth it. It's worth feeling uncomfortable for.
Absolutely. I have birthed many worthwhile things in discomfort.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
I wrote a book that gave me a great deal of discomfort.
Can just imagine.
Yes. And No One Is Self-Made is out in the world right now because I sat through and wrote through and edited through and challenged myself through that discomfort.
And we're so grateful to you for that.
At some point in writing the book, you had the thought, why did I agree to do this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Emma and I have written together. We know what that's like. All right. So Lakeysha Hallmon, once again, the book is No One Is Self-Made, Build Your Village to Flourish in Business and Life. We will have a link to that in the show notes, as well as your web page. This has been a lovely conversation, and one I think is going to be very inspiring and useful to a lot of people out there. I know it's been for me.
Yes, absolutely. Lots of wonderful invitations and empowering that we can make a difference. We can build communities, and that truly matters to where we're at in the world today.
Yeah. And we can be happy.
Oh my goodness. True.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Life's Dirty Little Secrets podcast.
If you have any feedback for us or secrets for future episodes, you can email us at lifesdirtylittlesecretspodcast@gmail.com.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Life's Dirty Little Secrets or on Facebook at Life's Dirty Little Secrets podcast.
We invite you to follow, rate, and review us on wherever you listen to this podcast. It is the best way to get our podcast out in front of new listeners.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more.
See you then.